Welcome back to Singapore Property Talk Law. Now, despite our name, today we're tackling something really fundamental to public life here in Singapore. We're talking about integrity, accountability,
Yeah.
specifically within our critical agencies. We're doing a deep dive into the Auditor-General's Office report, the AGU report, for the financial year 2024-25.
Yeah, it's quite the document.
Before we really get into it, though, the contract details, the lapses, what's being done, please do us a quick favor. If you find these deep dives valuable, hit that like button and definitely subscribe to the channel. That way, you won't miss out on our future analyses. We'd really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So the AGU report, it's always an interesting read, sometimes a bit, well, sobering. This year, they flagged 25 significant lapses across different government agencies. But the ones that really stood out, the ones we're focusing on today, involve PUB, Singapore's National Water Agency.
That's right. Our mission today is to really dig into two specific multi-million-dollar contracts under PB that came under intense scrutiny. And these cases, they're not just simple mistakes. They actually highlight two different kinds of failure, wouldn't you say?
I think so. One seems rooted in, well, questions about integrity, potentially misleading actions. And the other looks more like lapses in basic management, maybe even negligence.
Exactly. Two sides of the accountability coin. Okay, let's unpack this crucial information.
So let's start with the first one, the integrity issue. This revolves around a pretty big contract, $7.95 million to supply biocide.
That's the chemical they use for midge control in reservoirs, right?
Almost precisely. Now, when the AGO auditors asked PIB for the necessary documents for this contract, they found something, well, alarming. Possible falsification of documents.
Okay, hold on. Falsification. What specific documents are we talking about here?
We're talking about certificates of analysis, COAs. Think of these as the quality control paperwork.
Right, the proof that the chemical delivered is actually what was ordered, meeting the specs, like the active ingredient level, which is obviously critical for it to work.
Exactly. And the audit found that the soft copies, the digital versions of 6 COAs that PROB provided, they showed, and this is the ADERO's term, telltale signs of alteration.
Telltale signs? Like what?
Well, when they compared these soft copies to the original hard copies they got directly from the contractor, there were differences, different version numbers, formatting wasn't consistent, even some of the information itself was different.
Wow. And what did the ABIGO conclude was the reason for these changes? Why alter them?
According to the AGO, the goal seemed to be to give the, quote, false impression that checks on the active ingredient level had been performed by a proper lab and that PUB had accepted the goods based on them meeting specifications.
So basically making it look like all the checks and balances were done correctly, even if they weren't, or at least the paperwork wasn't in order.
That appears to be the implication from the AGO's findings, and this is really serious stuff.
Yeah, I can imagine.
The AGO really stressed this point. Furnishing false or misleading information, it doesn't just mess up the audit itself. It fundamentally, and again quoting here, hampers the audit and casts doubt on the authenticity of other documents the agency holds.
Right. If you can't trust one set of documents, how can you trust anything else they give you? It erodes that core trust.
Exactly. The operational risks suddenly seem much bigger because the paper trail is compromised.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting. It sounds pretty bad, like a deliberate cover-up, but then there was a statement from Minister Grace Fu on September 22nd, 2025. This was after PUB did its own internal investigation.
Yes, and the internal investigation pointed the finger at one specific officer being responsible for altering those documents.
One officer, and what was the explanation given?
This is where it gets nuanced. The officer admitted altering the documents, yes, but the stated reason, it was to cover up the incompleteness of the original documents to be provided to the AGO auditors.
Incompleteness. So not necessarily that the chemical itself was bad.
Correct. The officer apparently maintained, and the investigation seemed to confirm, that the contents, meaning the actual quality of the biocide stock, were accurate and did meet the standards. So the minister concluded it was an error of judgment, a serious one, but distinguished it from a lack of integrity concerning, say, financial loss or operational failure with the biocide itself.
An error of judgment. I mean, I get the distinction they're trying to make. No bad chemicals were used, no money wasted on faulty product. But, and maybe you listening are thinking this too, isn't deliberately changing an official document to mislead auditors. Isn't that fundamentally an integrity issue, regardless of the underlying facts?
That's the crux of the debate, isn't it? It highlights attention. From the ministry's perspective, maybe the focus was on no harm, no foul regarding the actual water treatment or finances. But from the AGO's perspective, and likely from a public trust standpoint, the act of falsification itself is the breach of integrity. It undermines the entire accountability process.
Yeah, altering evidence for an audit just feels like it crosses a line beyond a simple mistake or oversight.
Hmm.
It suggests a cultural issue, perhaps, saving face over transparency.
It certainly raises questions about the internal controls and culture that allowed that to happen, even if it was just one officer. It shows how pressure, maybe to look good for auditors, can lead to very poor decisions.
Okay, that's a really critical point. And it leads us quite nicely into the second major case the AHO flagged at PUBA. This one seems less about deliberate alteration, maybe, and more about, well, let's call it weak management and potential financial issues.
That's right. We're moving to a different contract now, a $6.75 million one for waterscape works. Think fountains, water features, that sort of thing. And here, the AHO found possible irregularities in quotations for something called star rate items.
Star rate items. Okay,
Yeah.
What are those exactly for those of us not deep in contract jargon?
Good question. So basically, when you sign a big contract, you agree on prices for lots of specific tasks, right? But sometimes designs change or unexpected work pops up that wasn't in the original list. These new unpriced items are the star rate items, and the contractor needs to provide new quotes for them. Crucially, Paybe is supposed to check these quotes, usually against market rates, to make sure they represent good value for money before approving them.
Got it. So new work needs new quotes, properly checked. What did the AGO find here?
Well, this is where it gets quite staggering. The audit looked closely at 25 of these star rate items, and they found irregularities in 23 of them.
Wait, 23 out of 25?
Yes, 23. That represented about $148,900 of the value they checked, which means 94% of the value of those supplementary quotes they examined were questionable.
94%. That's not just a few slip-ups. That sounds systemic.
It certainly raised serious concerns for the AGU. They explicitly questioned the authenticity of the quotations provided, and they doubted whether good value for money was actually obtained for this waterscape work.
So taxpayers might have overpaid significantly because these quotes weren't checked properly, or worse.
That's the implication. And given how widespread it was, 23 out of 25, it suggested more than just poor paperwork. In fact, PE took this finding incredibly seriously. They actually lodged a police report.
A police report. Okay, that escalates things.
It does. It signals they suspect possible fraudulent practices related specifically to how these waterscape quotations were submitted and approved.
Wow. So two really distinct issues then. The biocide case, potential deliberate document alteration, raising integrity flags even if the product was okay, and the waterscape case, systemic failures in checking supplementary costs leading to potential fraud and wasted money.
Exactly. But the ABU report didn't stop there. It also highlighted more general pervasive negligence in just basic contract management. And this had real quantifiable financial consequences.
Yeah, look at this show up.
This actually circles back to the biocide contract and other chemical supply contracts as well. The issue is stock monitoring, or rather, the lack of it.
You mean keeping track of how much chemical they had on hand?
Precisely. Agencies like PUB have set procedures, trigger levels, for reordering stock. The idea is to reorder in time so you can use cheaper sea freight, not expensive air freight.
Makes sense. Standard inventory management.
Should be. But the AJO checked 6 purchase orders for biocide, and for all 6, the stock levels had dropped way below the reorder trigger point,
How far below?
between 26% and 56% below the level where they should have already reordered.
That's not great. So what happened? Did they run out?
They didn't run out, but because the orders were placed so late, they had to rush. And this is where the direct financial hit comes in. For 4 of those purchase orders, PUB had to pay extra to air freight the stocks to get them here quickly.
Instead of using the cheaper sea freight they should have planned for, how much extra did that cost?
Approximately $302,600.
Ouch. Over $300,000 just because someone wasn't watching the stock levels properly.
That's what it boils down to. It's a tangible cost resulting directly from, well, weak internal controls and oversight.
So who was responsible for this oversight?
The AGO pointed to a couple of things. One, individual officers apparently not being diligent enough in their monitoring duties. And 2, inadequate supervision. Management wasn't effectively enforcing the basic contractual requirements like, verifying documents or making sure stock checks were actually happening.
So it wasn't just one person dropping the ball, it was a broader supervisory issue too.
Seems so. And as a result, 6 PB officers ended up facing disciplinary action specifically for these general management lapses.
6 officers. Okay, so that's separate from the one officer involved in the document alteration for the biocide COAs.
Correct. That one officer faced action for the alteration itself. These SITs were disciplined for the broader failures in contract management, like the stock monitoring issue.
Right. Okay, so we've laid out the problems, the altered documents, the questionable star rates, the stock mismanagement. Let's talk solutions. What actually happened to the officers involved? And more importantly, what is POO doing systemically to prevent this stuff from happening again?
Okay, let's start with the individual accountability. For the officer who altered the biocide documents, the disciplinary action was quite significant. They received a formal reprimand and also got a downgraded performance grade, which, can impact bonuses, career progression, things like that.
Okay. And for the others, the management lapse folks, disciplinary action too, as you said.
Yes, though the specifics weren't detailed in the same way. But the bigger story, I think, is the organizational changes Pagyub is putting in place. They seem to recognize that these individual failures often point to weaknesses in the system itself.
Right. You need to fix the system, not just penalize individuals after the fact. So what are they doing?
First off, they're tightening their standard operating procedures, their SOPs.
Yeah.
Directly addressing the biocide COA issue, they now specifically require the submission of original certificates of analysis.
So no more relying on potentially altered soft copies. Get the original paper.
Exactly. Makes it much harder to tamper with. Second, they're beefing up their internal audits, they're increasing the scope, and specifically adding more regular, robust checks on star rate items in contract variations.
So directly targeting that waterscape contract problem. Don't wait for the AG. Check it internally more often.
Precisely. Continuous verification, making it part of the routine, not just an external audit scramble.
Okay, SOPs tightened. More internal checks.
Mm.
What else? You mentioned technology earlier.
Yes, and this is quite interesting. PUB is looking seriously at leveraging digital tools, even AI, artificial intelligence.
AI, how would that help here?
Well, think about it. AI could potentially be used to automatically scan and compare documents like COAs against required templates or past versions, flagging inconsistencies much faster than a human might.
Okay, I see. Like an automated check for those telltale signs the AG found.
Could be. Or it could analyze quotation data, comparing star rates against market benchmarks automatically to flag potentially inflated prices.
Right, potentially catching those waterscape-type irregularities earlier.
And critically, they're also looking at automating processes like stock monitoring.
Taking the human element out of remembering to check the levels.
Pretty much. If the system automatically tracks inventory and triggers reorder alerts based on preset rules, you significantly reduce the risk of that human error or negligence that led to the $3,600 air freight cost.
So using technology to build in some of the diligence that seemed to be lacking.
That seems to be a major part of the strategy. Reduce reliance on manual checks, mitigate the risk of human oversight failures.
We should probably also quickly mention that other issue flagged the poorly managed maintenance contracts for water quality analyzers. How did that get resolved?
Right, that was another finding. Pay basically said they've addressed it by using other existing contracts to cover that maintenance work. And they also emphasized that while the contract management for those specific analyzers was poor, the overall system for ensuring clean, safe drinking water was never compromised.
So they positioned those particular analyzers as sort of additional precautionary checks, not the primary safety system.
That was the clarification, yes. Important context, because the core service delivery safe water wasn't affected, even though the contract management aspect failed.
Okay. And looking even broader, beyond just Pub A, if we connect this to the bigger picture, what's the government-wide response?
The Ministry of Finance, MOF, has stepped in. They're taking this seriously across the board. They're updating training programs for public officers everywhere, focusing specifically on helping them better identify key risks in contracts and procurement.
So trying to improve capabilities across the entire public service.
Exactly. And reinforcing the message, loud and clear, that actions that undermine integrity, like altering documents or being negligent with public funds, will not be condoned.
It's an acknowledgement that these risks aren't unique to Pub. They exist wherever complex procurement happens in government.
Precisely. It's about strengthening the entire system's resilience against these kinds of lapses.
So wrapping things up a bit, what are the key takeaways here for you listening at home? This deep dive really shows how crucial constant vigilance is. whether it's against deliberate acts like altering documents or just the slow creep of negligence in basic supervision, like monitoring stock levels.
Yeah, both can have serious consequences for public trust and public funds. The ADA report itself kind of acts like an X-ray, doesn't it, revealing these hidden weaknesses. And their overall warning is pretty stark. Even seemingly small lapses, as they put it, can snowball. They could lead to material errors or be exploited, resulting in significant loss.
It really underscores the need for robust internal controls. You can't just rely on goodwill or assume everyone's doing their job perfectly.
Absolutely. And that brings us to a really fascinating point to consider, especially with Pub's response focusing on automation and AI.
Right. They're building systems designed explicitly to catch or prevent human error and negligence.
Mm.
The system checks the checkers, in a way.
Yeah. So what does this all mean? Think about it. If AI is now checking the stock levels or scanning the COAs for anomalies or flagging weird star rate quotes.
It probably reduces the chance of that $300,000 air freight mistake happening again. It catches the inconsistencies faster.
For sure. But does that create a different kind of risk? Maybe a reliance on the tech? Does it subtly shift the focus of accountability?
How so?
Well, if the system is doing the routine diligence, what then becomes the primary role, the primary responsibility of the human officer?
Critical thinking, maybe. Dealing with the exceptions the system flags. Making judgments the AI can't.
Perhaps. But also, maybe it puts an even greater emphasis on fundamental integrity. If you know an AI is less likely to miss a dodgy quotation, does that deter fraud? Or, conversely, if routine tasks are automated, does it lead to a sense of complacency, making people less vigilant about the things the AI doesn't check, or perhaps more susceptible to more sophisticated, calculated breaches that try to game the system itself?
That's a really sharp point. What human oversight remains essential when the technology is specifically designed to root out human administrative mistakes. How do you maintain personal accountability and ethical judgment in an increasingly automated environment?
That's the question, isn't it? It's probably the next big challenge in public sector management, not just for PUBA, but everywhere. Balancing technological efficiency with human judgment and, crucially, human integrity.
A really compelling thought to leave everyone with. Technology as a tool, but not a replacement for fundamental accountability. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the AGO report and PUB's response. We hope this analysis gave you some valuable context. We'll catch you next time on Singapore Property Talk Law and the Deep Dive.